The U.S. Supreme Court has struck down a New York State law that was on the books for more than a century. The state's right to carry law strictly limited a person's ability to carry a gun outside the home. Obtaining a gun carry permit in New York requires proving that you face special or unique danger and have proper cause to get one. But two upstate New York residents challenged the law in 2014, saying they should not have to prove proper cause to exercise a constitutional right. The High Court has ruled New York's law violates the Second Amendment. Now, to better understand this ruling, what it means for the state, the city, the tri-state area, we are joined by Professor James Sample from Hofstra Law School. Thank you for joining us right now. First, your reaction to this.
Thank you, Dana. This is a landmark ruling. This is a momentous day in American history. And for the first time in American history, the Supreme Court today defined a particular part of the Second Amendment that they had paid little heed in prior decisions, and that is the phrase "and bear." In 2008, the Supreme Court, in a case called District of Columbia v. Heller, held that the right to keep arms meant that particular individual citizens had the right to keep arms in their homes. Today, the court focuses on the phrase "and bear arms" to say that there is no basis for New York or the 7 states that had laws like New York states that required an individual who wanted to carry a concealed weapon, a concealed handgun, to show cause, in essence, to say in advance and get an advance determination by an administrative figure, a government figure, that the individual had a particularized need for that concealed carry permit.
So what does it mean then now for gun owners as far as obtaining guns and carrying them, bearing them, as you went into the detail there?
What this decision means is that the nation, which is already the world leader, for better or for worse, depending on your perspective, in guns per capita, will be even more awash in guns. What this means in places that are densely populated, like New York City, like New Jersey, two of the areas that are most directly impacted by today's ruling, is that an individual no longer has to go through preliminary steps in order to carry a concealed handgun. What this means is that we will have more guns and that more people will have access to them with fewer restrictions and fewer opportunities to prevent individuals who might wish to do others harm from obtaining those handguns. There are some questions, particularly in an area like New York City. Does this mean subways, theaters, hospitals, arenas, stadiums? Those are typically referred to as sensitive places, and the court today doesn't answer the question of whether and to what extent a state like New York might wish to regulate the possession of concealed weapons in those areas. That's going to be an area that will be a battle in the legislature and a battle in the courts for years to come.
So for lawmakers, just talking about those steps, those questions that are still unanswered, Governor Kathy Hochul today tweeting in response, the Supreme Court has stripped away New York's ability to protect its citizens. She called the ruling reckless and reprehensible. Can you say more about that, Jim? You said it could take a long, long time. I mean, how do lawmakers even go about something like this?
Well, those are strong words from Governor Hochul, to be sure, and there are strong words from across the nation from those who are deeply, deeply concerned with the epidemic, frankly, of gun deaths in America, whether you look to Buffalo just a couple of weeks ago or to the massacre of little school children in Uvalde, Texas, or to the many, many other instances in which gun violence has really wreaked havoc in the United States. This decision is interesting for the very reason that you just lasered in on, Dana, and that is that the court majority of 6 that handed this decision down is typically a states' rights majority. They typically focus on the idea that the federal government shouldn't be telling the states what to do, and that states should be free to experiment, laboratories of democratic experimentation, that's often said. And you may think that in coming days, we will see a decision from this very same court majority on the matter of abortion rights, where it's very possible the court will say, well, we should leave this matter to the states and that it shouldn't be a matter of constitutional law. Now, there are ways in which one might distinguish the two rights at issue, but this puts states who have the responsibility and municipalities who have the responsibility to protect their citizens in a very, very difficult situation. The situation in the United States with respect to gun violence is radically different than the founders could have ever imagined in 1791. The weapons are different, the population density is different, the means and access is radically different. And so this court says, in essence, the only thing that matters is history, and self-selected history at that, ignoring, for example, states like New York that have this long, over 100-year tradition in which this very modest gun control measure had been in place.
Talking about, there are other states, vulnerable states, New Jersey. What could we see for New Jersey then?
New Jersey finds itself in a very similar posture to the posture that New York finds itself, as with California. You know, it's interesting to think about a comparison of modern day society to the society that adopted our Constitution, which is a sacred document. But the reality is that New York City alone has a population greater than the population of the United States circa the founding. That's a fairly dramatic way of thinking about this. And between technology and the nature of the weapons at issue, the ability of individuals to carry out not just individual homicides, but mass killings, states like New Jersey, California, and New York are in a very, very difficult situation. The good news is that they can still regulate in those sensitive areas, and that there are still avenues for things like background checks and fingerprinting analysis in advance of purchase. Justice Kavanaugh, who's part of that 6-member majority, wrote a concurring opinion in which he makes it clear that, at least in his view, not necessarily speaking for Justice Thomas and Justice Alito and some of the harder line hardliners, that there are some measures that governments can still undertake. And amazingly, in a juxtaposition of democracy, just across the way in Washington, D.C., the Senate is just today.
Isn't that amazing? Yes. Go ahead.
Incredible. Debating legislation on some, to be clear, very modest measures with regard to gun control, but the first such federal measures to really have a serious chance of passing in almost 30 years. And so that is quite a juxtaposition.
We know the outrage, and then there is the other side of this today, Jim. The National Rifle Association celebrating the Supreme Court's decision to expand gun rights, calling the 6-3 ruling a watershed win. Today's ruling, a watershed win for good men and women all across America, and is the result of a decades-long fight. The NRA has led that. From Wayne LaPierre, the NRA's executive vice president and CEO. No surprise that's that response from the NRA.
Well, he's right about one thing, and he's right that it is today's ruling is the result of a decades-long war that has been fought by gun rights advocates. It is a victory for them. My fear is that the inevitable and, frankly, the certain consequence of today is that there will be more guns, more gun deaths, and, frankly, more innocent children who are likely to die because of what they perceive to be a victory. So it's a victory for formalism and the loss of life. It's hard for me to celebrate.
Yeah. Professor James Sample, professor of law at Hofstra University. Thank you so much for joining us, Jim. We really appreciate you helping us understand this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
To read the complete U.S. Supreme Court opinion, visit our website on cbsnewyork.com.